How do you all feel about this relationship between betting and, and sport? Is it good? Is it not good? Yeah, just putting that out there, because I think it's obviously quite big and should be discussed.
I'd say it's one of the categories that you just have to be quite open-minded about. There are certain geographies that obviously betting is very restricted. Like at Burnley, we have front of Sher betting partner, and they're Asian, and obviously in that market, betting is very popular with with the consumer, and actually it provides us as a tool to engage that consumer authentically and try and grow our audience in that market. And I'd say the best thing about having betting brands tied to your club is you then actually build a relationship with that brand to ensure that when they are activating, they're doing it in a premium way, they're doing it in a way that respects your brand, and they're not doing it in some grey-black area that you just don't know about. So actually, being able to engage with them and having the knowledge of what they're doing is actually a lot more beneficial than if you were to try and turn a blind eye and ignore it doesn't exist.
On our side, we don't have a betting partner right now, so if you have a contact at a betting partner that is legal in Illinois, let me know. But what we try to do, because we know that our fans love betting, and MLS fans love betting more than any other major sports in the US actually, is still educate them on how they should bet. So when you come to the stadium at the Fire, you still see advertisement that actually promotes safe betting. So put restrictions on how much you put and trying to get the message that it's not just throw your money, use your credit card to bet, but bet responsibly, which is something that we should all be accountable for as we take on the betting industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reality that in today's world, at least in international football, betting is, after TV rights, right, for a lot of rights holders, whether a club or a league, it's probably their highest paying category, right? And so, with the exception of probably the premium rights holders in football, it's the highest paying category, and it's a way to offset some of the bigger expenses, whether it's player costs or transfers or acquisitions. So in many ways, it's a quick win, right? But how do you get to that quick win? And part of that is knowing the betting company that you're going to work with, what values they represent, what's their compliance look like, right? How are they updating you when they see some irregularities in the system or in betting? So for example, I was fortunate with my team, we brokered the first sponsorship betting deal for CONMEBOL, for Libertadores, right, with Betfair. And with Paddy Power, they walked us through exactly how they operate, how they take bets. When they see irregularities, they'll let us know, CONMEBOL know. We also brokered the first ever sponsorship for FIFA with Betano, right, at the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. And that was a very, very rigorous deal in terms of compliance and legal and going through all the motions and all the steps. So part of it's the company that you keep. Yeah. It's a reality in the world today in football that you're going to have betting brands, right, to keep the ecosystem up, right? But again, who are the betting brands, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, you come across brands that, you don't know where the money comes from. We talked about that when we were meeting earlier, right? So doing the right due diligence, right, when you're working with a betting partner.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree with Luis. Obviously, it's very, very important that you do your due diligence. They are part of the ecosystem, if you want to or not. They're driving definitely revenue. I mean, look in Italy, for instance, right, where you have the infotainment space now. All of a sudden, officially betting is not allowed, even though everyone knows that there are betting brands behind it. If you take that revenue off rights holders, it leaves a big gap, and then we can go on with financial fair play and whatever you want to call it, right? So it has its justification in the market. It's just a matter of being diligent and obviously understanding with who you go into bet, and then execute and activate in the right way, reasonably.
Because just stay with you. For those of you who don't know, EMW means East meets West. So I think you have a really interesting perspective in terms of being able to work across so many markets from the Far East to here, creating these partnerships, doing different types of deals. In your experience, what are some of the differences that you noticed between some of the emerging, in terms of strategies, how sponsors, what are they looking for, how they show up, how they activate between more mature markets and emerging markets?
I would say if we go really Far East, Asia, China, usually, and I guess everyone is right now, we're talking about Far East, more looking into Saudi and the Middle East and probably the rest of Asia. You can see that brands are coming back quite strongly. We see that with our sales team, that there's a big interest in sponsoring or going back into the West. But important is the educational piece, right? There is definitely money to be made. However, they don't often know how to broker those deals or how to get into the Western world. So in that sense, you need to educate them quite a lot. You need to make them understand just because you put maybe $1 million down doesn't mean you can get everything and everyone and you can be present everywhere, right? That's also very important. So there's a lot of education which goes into it. And the more saturated and experienced market, there you can see, okay, this is what we spend, this is the ROI we expect, this is exactly what we want from you, and then you can start negotiating. So,
yeah, that's it. Thanks, Luis. You're in an interesting place. So, operating between, at a club that has obviously a Hispanic or Mexican fan base and perhaps U.S. fan base as well. How does that play into the way that you guys build a proposition around what you're doing and to cater to those different audiences? Because I think it's quite a unique place to be.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for those of you who don't know, Juárez is on the U.S.-Mexico border. It borders El Paso, Texas. So we have this unique distinction of being on the border with, there's 3 states, New Mexico, Texas, and Chihuahua, 2 countries, and 2 different cultures in many ways, and a subculture, right? So subculture is, the Mexican-American culture, which in the U.S. represents over 30 million people, and so in many ways it's a top 20 economy in the world, right? And so we embrace things, we talked about the margarita, the burrito, we embrace things like Spanglish, right? A lot of our fans are bilingual and they're bicultural, right? They can switch from being American to being Mexican or being both, right? Some of them prefer to speak English mixed with Spanish and vice versa. We have players that do that every day, right? So it's how do we leverage that and how do we embrace that to be different, right? And so our proposition always is, we represent a subset of a culture that really influences GDP in the United States and in Mexico. So I was talking earlier with Jeff Yoakum from Elevate. What I was saying was, you have a culture in El Paso and Juárez where you have people born in the U.S. side, raised in Juárez, went to school in Juárez, right? Now work in El Paso making U.S. dollars and live in Juárez, right? So basically everything goes up in price, right? So we have a very high GDP where even though our men's team probably doesn't have the best result on the field, our ticket price is the 3rd highest in Liga MX, and probably higher than some MLS teams. Yeah, our average ticket price is about $30, higher than some MLS teams. So when you throw out those stats, it just reflects, the high buying power of this consumer. So we try and leverage it as much as we can.
Fascinating. Federico, it's been an interesting. You're the only one here from from MLS. We're talking about U.S. market. Obviously, it's been fascinating to watch what's happening in MLS, particularly in the past couple of years. Particularly what this team is doing here. What have you noticed around this space? The way that the league is league and its teams, for that matter, are positioning themselves in the context of global football. Like, what is it about this league, this country, this audience that's shaping your story? Keeping in mind that you have probably some of them are in the room, whether it's Bayern Munich or Manchester City or Chelsea. All these clubs are trying to build their brands here as well. So how are you shaping that proposition?
Well, it's an interesting challenge. Actually, I switched from Serie A going to the MLS. One, because the challenge of the MLS is very exciting. So you don't know where the ceiling is going to be, which for somebody that's competitive makes it very, very exciting to be part of that journey. But also what the MLS has as difference from any other property in Europe is that we can build infrastructures without going through crazy bureaucratic processes. So a lot of MLS teams are building that trust and that recognition with their fans through new stadium, new performance facilities that hopefully are going to translate in the next 5 to 10 years following the World Cup into better players, better competition, but also better fans to engage with when you own your own stadium and you own your own facilities throughout the country. And we are the youngest demographic out of all the other major sports in the US. And 70% are Hispanic, which is the fastest growing cultural group within the US. So it's very exciting moment to be part
Is that what resonates when you speak to, I suppose when you speak to partners, you have to tell them where you are in the context of not just obviously football, but just everything else they can do with other sports. So is that what resonates the most, this younger demographic that increasingly partners want to tap into?
Yeah, the younger demographic is for sure one of the key ones, but also the dream of soccer. So the dream of where the MLS can be, that's the main selling point at the end of the day, because you're buying a stock that is growing, which I'm not going to say is going to be the next Tesla or the next Google, but that's what we're kind of betting on by all being here and being in the US.
Yeah, interesting. Nick, at the moment, hopefully not for long, but at the moment, you guys are playing in the championship, which, I'm sure everyone knows is the division under the Premier League. Hope you'll be back in the Premier League next season. But for the moment, you are in the championship. Again, you think about this ecosystem of football, which is massive. Obviously, the popularity of the Premier League being very much in your sort of all around you. How do you build a story, build a narrative around Burnley? Obviously, steeped in tradition, football club, to make it still appealing and interesting as an international platform for the partners that you're looking to attract, because I think it's a different challenge to others on the panel here.
Yeah, so I guess starting off, for those that don't know, Burnley is a small town north of Manchester, 3 hours drive north of London. It's got a population of about 80,000 people, and as much as marketing people love to say our club is the heartbeat of the city, literally 25% of the population will be in our stadium on a match day. It's very much a blue-collar, hard-working, grafting town, and it's one of the it's the lowest in kind of economic stances in the entire country. So economically, not an amazing place to be, yet we heavily overachieve. We were in the Premiership for 10 years. Yes, we've just dropped down, but ultimately, the values of the club don't change whatever league we're in. So we are one of the original 12 leagues that create the Football League. We were founded in the 1800s. We've got the second oldest stadium, and we very much go to market knowing we've got legacy, but we're also very futuristic, we're very innovative, and very much we want to be soccer's favorite underdog. And we literally bring in partners and bring in brands that truly that resonates with, and we give them that authentic platform to portray their brand with that message. And here in the US, we've got, obviously, we're fortunate to have investors such as JJ Watt, Kylia Watt, Do Perfect, that provide us an alternative media platform to engage consumers. But we've got Visit Detroit, we've got Chatbooks, we've got Miller Lite. We're the only soccer club to have a clothing range with Travis Matthew, and all of these brands are buying into the narrative. So, touch wood, we will be back in the Premiership next year, and all it really gives you is more exposure globally, but the values and the authentic message that we can give is pretty much the same.
Fascinating. Thanks. Michele, come back to you. Most people in this room probably have a particular interest, and I'm speaking for most people, hopefully that's the case, but particularly interested in this market and what's happening here and the growth of football here, and obviously Club World Cup, FIFA World Cup. So much of your work, again, it's in the name of the company, is bringing different regions, different partners together, which I think is fascinating. How much, I know you do a lot of work in Europe, Middle East, sort of the Far East. Are you seeing a lot of interest in North America now in terms of Chinese or Middle Eastern companies looking to US? Goes without saying, massive consumer market, has we talked about the population and the interest in football. What are you seeing from where you are in terms of the interest or lack of interest in this market at this moment in time from partners from different sponsors from different from the Far East, or the Far East, Middle East, from other parts of the world? Let's just say that.
We indeed do have a lot of actually interest in the US market leading up to the World Cup, and then not to forget obviously to 28, right? There's the LA Olympic Games are coming up as well.
Yeah.
So I think there are going to be 3 major tournaments if you want to include also the Club World Cup next year, which we still don't know exactly how it's going to plan out. But a lot of brands are knocking on the door and asks, okay, what can we get? What type of assets can we get, for instance, for the Club World Cup? What is the entry level of those assets or inventory? They're still hesitant, but interested. Yeah, so there's definitely more coming because, again, major tournaments are coming, right? This is always piques interest. The culture differences are obviously always a challenge, right? When you see Chinese culture, Asian culture in comparison to a US culture. But there's a trend, we can see that. We just recently did our first franchise deal, by the way, ourselves with the LA Lakers, with a Spanish brand. Yeah, they were very much interested in, again, franchise US, which has obviously a big, well, fan engagement with the Spanish audience. Lakers were an obvious choice. Sorry, Luis, next time I come to you, which is so close to the border, right? So
We don't have a betting sponsor at the moment.
we can work on that.
There we go.
So yeah, there's definitely a trend that we have more brands knocking on the door and asking for opportunities.
Let's go back to you. Given where you are, you just explained the unique sort of geographical location where you exist. You're almost like a bridge of sorts, a cultural bridge between such big, well, Mexico, a very well-established football nation and very much emerging, I think it's safe to say, still emerging football nation here, soccer nation. What challenges and opportunities does that present from your perspective when it comes to attracting partners, commercial partners?
Well, the obvious one is, so the market thinks sometimes, and even, I mean, whether it's been former bosses of mine or owners, there's an issue, especially in the US and Mexico. People think, oh, well, you're on the border, it's Hispanic, so when you're going to sell beer, right, there's value in the US consumer because they see it on TV, they see the brand, and right, so you can hit 2 markets at once. And that's actually not true. I'll tell you why it's not true, because coincidentally in North America, the US for beer, for example, Heineken the US operates completely different than Heineken Mexico, right? And so there may be a fit, right? But what Heineken US will say is, I need to speak to my colleague in Heineken Mexico and see if it fits with his strategy or her strategy, right? And so we run against that all the time, right? So part of it is, how do you find a unique fit with maybe more local brands that don't have to go through this whole bureaucratic process of, you know, different budgets, different regions. And by the way, it's happened at every single company I've worked at, whether it's MLS, whether it's UEFA, whether it's FIFA. You always run into these compliance issues in terms of where the money is going to come from, right? So again, it's part of the narrative. What's the unique story? What are the unique data points? We talked about our ticket price earlier. What narrative do we have to justify and convince the brand and the buyer side that, you know, one, maybe it's the Mexican side taking all of the risk, right, and providing free value to the US side, or even vice versa, right? I was fortunate enough to work when I was at IMG on the Tecate Liga MX deal, right, and there was naturally going to be some spillover into the US, and Heineken Mexico felt very comfortable. It's fine, they can take that, you know, if it's something added value for them that they can leverage, that's fine. So again, narrative, right, and how can you make the opportunity a must-buy?
I'm learning a lot, so it's quite.
You're gonna buy a sponsorship?
Great. I hope you guys
Is it
enjoy
working?
this. Huh?
Is it working?
Yes. Yeah. Federico,
I know, I have to follow up from what he just said, which is hard, but we'll try.
well, you can, yeah, we'll give it our best go.
You've got Lugano, you've got Switzerland to sell, which I think is also very nice.
That's a good point.
You can follow up on that. Look, I think one of the things I'm curious about when it comes to well, this Fire or just MLS clubs in general is this obviously quite a unique setup that you have in terms of being able to tap into your local, your local area, right? So your local sponsors, and then how do you look at that compared to national partners and perhaps even international now as, as the league is becoming much more visible internationally, thanks to, the broadcast deals and obviously the talent that's coming here, is that changing? When you sit there and you think about how do you build out your portfolio of partners, what does that look like from local to national to international?
Yeah, so one thing first, taking the assist from Luis, like we have a sister club in Lugano as well, so we're trying to build a connection between the two clubs. So bringing a partner that can sort of create that bridge, the cultural bridge between Chicago and Lugano, which is only 45 minutes of Italy. So it's very easy to access from Milan. So we're trying to actually onboard a couple of partners that could live both with the Fire and with Lugano FC, which is a cool angle for us to leverage the global opportunities. We are not at the Inter Miami level yet, that we have Messi, Juárez that attract global audiences to watch their games. So it's hard for us to sell international brands in other markets, but we attract international companies. So we're able to sign Ferrero because they move their headquarters to Chicago. So they have interest in the market and we can leverage that to bring them on board. And then on the local side, we try to differentiate ourselves and what we do in the community. So really tying on how they can connect with the youth and how they can do good for our community efforts, which is a unique play to get the local brands tapped into the Fire.
Nick, you mentioned that you obviously get quite a few international partners. It's quite interesting. I wonder how much, I'm curious how much of that you think is driven by, again, people like, JJ Watt's being involved. Does he give you that sort of reach that you maybe wouldn't have had otherwise, or not? I mean, that's the first question. I was like, wanted to follow up to what you were asking earlier.
Yeah, our investment team are heavily involved in the club.
Yeah.
They are proactive to engage with the fans, and because their own social following, between Do Perfect and JJ, you've got 120 million plus followers, which when we're trying to target the US as our tier 1 market, that is a platform that no other football club in the UK has. It would take us years to build up a social platform in North America to get that sort of number and a huge amount of investment. So for these guys to not just come in and invest, but actually proactively engage with the club because they see the value in the club is a formidable opportunity for us. And it just provides us with credibility in the marketplace. So when we are going to brands, yes, we can't offer rights around our investors because they've got their own deals and everything else. But it gives us a level of credibility that, people, say in the US, if they see JJ or Do Perfect, promoting it and posting it, they're like, okay, I've seen it, I understand it, I'm willing to, it gets you through the door. Then it's down to really showcasing, do you have an asset proposition that is localized, that can actually engage an audience here? You're not just saying, by the way, we're a great club from the UK, we can give you some LED signage. Like, yes, we'll get you some global exposure. What can you actually do for a marketeer to drive their brand or drive their service here? That's the key factor.
I mean, assuming that not everybody can have very famous, investors who are that involved, and you guys have done, I think, a fascinating job of being able to bring some of the types of partners that you mentioned. When you think about that and what you, how you've articulated that story, what do you think, if you had to, speaking to the audience in the room, talk about North America, what do you think are 1 or 2 or 3 lessons from what you guys have done that you think could be applicable to, to this market?
So I'd say one of the key things, and partly from my former role when I was overseeing Europe and Middle East for the NBA, is you've got to have a very clear strategy of where you're going. As in, we could do an event in New York, no one in LA is going to hear about it. So you can't just crack America in the same way brands can't just crack Europe. You've got to be quite targeted and quite specific at what you're trying to achieve. Because every market in Europe is a valuable proposition. There's a lot of money in every market you can do, and the same in the US. So for me, it's like, and we've pretty much picked 4 or 5 states, and we're going to go after those 4 or 5 states and grow a core fan base in those states. Now, across the rest of the US, yes, that you'd like to hope there will be a casual consumer base that we can also tap into. But we want to build a core base that we resonate with every year. We do on-the-ground activities, whether it's football tournaments, whether it's marketing initiatives, pre-season tours, eventually everything. We want to come back year upon year upon year and not just be like another football club that drops in, does a pre-season game, disappears for 3 years, and thinks they're building a fan base, because you're not. It's an entertainment product if you just do it that model. So if you want to authentically grow a fan base, you've got to invest time and resource into that market.
Well, I think you raise a really good point. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was, I can't remember which CEO it was, but basically talking about how we are all in the entertainment industry, right? So you're not competing against, other clubs in the championship. You're competing with other sports. You're competing with other forms of, with Netflix and Fortnite and things like anything that's, where people are consuming their time. I'd love to hear, from all of you. Do you feel that is when you're talking to partners, are they particularly looking to tap into sport and that's why they're interested in the conversation, or are they much more agnostic? They're like, look, we're just, we're looking to tap into an audience. So we could be working with you in the same way that we could be working with a film franchise or something like that. Because I think that's that's been one of the biggest evolutions of this space, is that sport's still unique, but the way people spend their time and the desire to connect with people, ultimately, you're the conduit to an audience, right? So do you think that's been, I guess the question to all of, what do you think? Is that a challenge now because the choice is so much bigger?
I think partly, excuse me, I think partly it is, but I think not, because the cool thing about sport is it's still live, right? There's a winner, there's a loser, it's dramatic, it's a heavy point of passion, it fulfills a range anywhere from 5 years old to 80 years old, depending on who you're trying to target. That's why college sports do incredibly well, football as well in Europe. So it hits a lot of key spots that other forms of entertainment can't do, right? It doesn't mean that other forms of entertainment aren't interesting and they may provide a great value proposition. But I do think we have a strength in that sport will always be around, it will evolve, and it will always be, it will convey a very passionate audience, right? And ultimately, it's great storytelling.
It's fantastic. That sounds scripted drama, so it is, yeah. You're right, in that sense, unique. What do you think, Michele?
Yeah, I think social media didn't really help, right, in terms of more access, more competition in general. If I look now, well, you said it before, now where do you spend your most time? Even our mobile phones are basically a mini computer, right? So we're spending probably 80% of our time on our computer, on our mini computers. So it's been definitely more challenging overall. So brands, and again, depending on which markets, and of course which sophistication, they are looking more to expand into certain markets, and the more agnostic they are, the more they look into who they want to sponsor, what they want to sponsor. From my experience so far, mostly it's okay, we want to break into this market, and roughly this is the audience, and then what is the best guess? And then we come up with a matchmaking process where, like, okay, we believe this sport, this club, etc. could be the right fit.
Just one thing to touch on that. Yes, we are competitors, but we try to find like a balance between sport and entertainment. So this year we launched a concert series. So after our game against Inter Miami, we had a Jason Derulo post-game concert for an hour long. So we tried to create that bridge between music and sport, knowing that we could go to market to different brands to attract a specific target for that 45 minutes. So knowing that we could find extra revenue through tapping into entertainment or music and connect it to sports, for us was very successful. And I think that's a cool angle that properties could look into.
One of the questions we were talking about earlier with you guys is around how we talk about activation, but it's not just sort of just what brands are doing, but the extent to which rights holders tap into their partners, right? So, do you think enough is being done in our industry, in the football industry, to tap into commercial partners as partners beyond revenue that they provide. So thinking about them more as strategic partners, like hey, are they a conduit to an audience? You know, are they able to help you build in certain areas that help you elevate the value of your proposition, reach certain people, engage certain audiences, so on and so forth. Do you see enough evolution in that space, or is it still quite transactional? Like it's just seen as a means to an end. We just need to hit a certain revenue number. That partner comes in, you know, we got the category filled. Nick, what's your, especially again, interested to hear your point of view because you work with the NBA. You might have some perspective in terms of the difference in different sports.
Yeah, ultimately, all partnerships should be working both ways. You should be being able to utilize whatever the brand is, their platforms to engage a wider audience. Now, if you focus on the brand first and create content that is essentially briefed by them, i.e., again, when we go to market, and we did this at the NBA, you need to act like a marketing agency. You need to act like a bespoke asset that you can create anything that they want that will authentically engage a consumer that they are trying to target. Now, the ability that you have as a marketing agency is we can add players to it, we can add IP to it. And therefore, if we're creating something that will resonate on their channels, that means we're putting our IP out to a mass audience that is not on our channels. Maybe they'll convert, maybe they won't, but at the same time, you're just building that brand awareness. So if you are going into partnerships purely on a financial incentive, you're never going to grow your data. You're never going to grow your audience. If you're going in with an open mind to say, yes, we've all got revenue targets, but this brand can actually take us to another level in this market. So maybe you'll accept a bit less, but you'll get the eyeballs that will be worth a whole lot more. So when you're going to another brand, that's when you achieve the higher revenue target. And you know, for us, we're very lucky, as I was saying, we've got Dude Perfect involved in the club. Everything we do at a youth level, they're on our junior kit, they're on all our junior tournaments, they're presenting partners of anything we do junior-wise, because we know they're trying to build an audience in Western Europe, 8 to 12 years old. Whilst for us, in the rest of the world, all kids know Dude Perfect, so it just provides a platform that they're giving us exposure whilst we're giving them exposure, and it's just a natural synergy.
That's great. Love that example. Luis?
Yeah, I think if it's done, it's cliche, if it's done in the right way and it's organic and it makes sense, and I believe in a hybrid option. What I mean by hybrid is, you know, the brand has to recognize that you have a financial responsibility to bring in revenue, right? And that is part of how the business runs. But at the same time, there are opportunities that it may make sense. So an example we use is us in Tijuana are the only teams in Liga MX that have to travel to every single away game on an airplane because of sheer distance. So we're talking about 6 teams, men's, women's, U19, 17, U15, all have to travel by plane. That's a massive expense for us, right? And so, yeah, for us, it would be beneficial to have an airline partner where maybe not everything's trade, right? Because then if they go away, you know, how do you find that expense line item when you didn't have it before? But what's a hybrid model that makes sense for both of us, where there's some savings on their end, there's value on their end, and there's value for us too. So I think done in the right way with the right approach, and that's why really good sponsorship deals, I think all of us here would agree, they take time to happen. They're not transactions. It's a partnership, right? You're marrying someone, you're entering into an agreement where there is value on both sides. So done the right way, the right deal process, the right sales cycle, yeah, I think it's very, very beneficial.
Good. I don't know if you want to. Should we take a question? You can take a question from the audience. I mean, I can talk about this all day. It's been great. But do we have any? Is there a microphone, or is anyone in the audience would like to ask a question? We have a couple minutes left, so I thought I'd give an opportunity. If not, I have another question that I could ask. Anyone? Don't all raise your hands at the same time. There you go.
Great questions. I will answer the first one. I'm more tequila, Don Julio 70. I'm not being paid to say that, but that is my favorite tequila. For anyone later who wants to buy me a margarita. I don't do great with mezcal. Bad experience in college. On the second one, yeah, I think it's fundamental. I think not necessarily on the brand side, like not what we offer to a brand, but more the other way around. So with AI, basically, we can turn things around a lot quicker for brands, right? And so now you don't have to have 10 or 15 salespeople. The days of when people say, "Oh, I need someone to come in and start, hitting the phones," right? And no one makes cold calls anymore, right? Cold calls don't exist. My first sponsorship job at MLS, I had to do some cold calls, right? No one does cold calls anymore, right? Everyone does LinkedIn cold messages, right? And so how can you use that to be much more efficient and much more targeted, right, in your sales process to find the right partner, right? Because most of the time, very rarely, unless you're a very big-time property, very rarely are brands looking for you, right? I think that's the golden goose. A brand calls you and says, "I want to do a sponsorship," right? Most of the time, it's the other way around. So how can you use AI to basically make your sales process much more effective and much more efficient?
Good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Got time for maybe one more? Anyone? I guess one hand. We will come back. Yeah. Very quickly, maybe one or two.
For me, Visit Detroit. They're just giving us a platform in the state of Michigan, which is one of our key states that we're growing, to just grow our audience as a natural. Outside of that, our betting brand is actually very proactive at pushing out content in Asia, and again, is having massive results on our social platforms. Obviously, it's for over adults only, but no, they're working really well.
I guess for me would be partnership that integrate the brand and the product for the first team as well. So we found a new food solution called Epicure that provides like catered meal for the players that are medically tailored. So that was like something that we're proud of because we take the care of the players also off the field.
Yeah, for me, I can't say because we're about to announce it in like 3 weeks in Juárez, so it'll combine margaritas and burritos and all that. So Diego, please close the deal as soon as possible. Who's sitting here in front of me. But my favorite one up to date is FIFA World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup, Unilever, global deal.
Yeah.
A company that doesn't need brand recognition, a company that you can find anywhere, right? Global, partnering with the biggest sporting event in history and finding synergies, and one really developing women's football, which women's football is going to grow the fastest global sport at the moment growing. So anything that invests in women's football and the development and trying to make the world, again, not cliche, the world a better place, those are my favorite deals.
I love that. And Michele, maybe finish up with your favorite deal.
Favorite deal? Probably the Arsenal Setsi Rubber deal, which we did. Setsi Rubber is one of the largest tire manufacturers in the world, and probably nobody of you heard of him before, me neither included. Our China team brought him to us in the tire category. Again, a category which I guess the three of you would agree is one of the most challenging ones. We did a 4-year, 7-figure deal, and actually live the partnership through and through now.
Great. Well, we are out of time, though I've very much enjoyed the conversation. So just, on my behalf, Nick, Federico, Luis, Michele, thank you very much. And thanks all of you for being a great audience. We'll stick around. If we didn't answer some questions, we'll be around so you can grab us on the way out. But thanks so much for spending time with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, man.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done, man.